Hey there, Con and I are back with another shoe review, and we've got the ASICS Metaspeed Edge Tokyo this time. We already talked about the Sky Tokyo, now we have the Edge Tokyo, and again, I got these a little bit before release, but that's because I have one of the best local running stores in the country. So I paid my own money for these, and all of these thoughts are my own. Can't wait to tell you about it. Right, Con? Con, what do you think of the Edge Tokyo so far? Okay friends, specs and features for the ASICS Metaspeed Edge Tokyo. I'm not going to spend too much time on the specs and features for this shoe because a lot of the specs and features will be the same as the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo, and I've already released a video on that, so go and look at that video. They both have the same Motion Wrap 3.0 upper. They both have pretty much the same outsole. The colors are different. The little scalene triangle is in a different place, but they are pretty much the same outsole. Now what is different about them is the midsole. We know that in the Sky Tokyo, I already talked about how in that video, the top layer is Flight Foam Turbo Plus, which is the PIBA compound, and then we have a straight, more level plate position, and then the bottom layer is the new Flight Foam Leap, which is aliphatic TPU, closer to the ground. In the Edge Tokyo, they flip-flopped them so that the bottom layer is the Flight Foam Turbo Plus, so we've got a big chunk of PIBA in the heel. To the touch, it does feel a little bit more stable. I've only tried these on for a little bit in the store. I haven't run in them, so I can't really tell you how more stable or less stable it is. And then the top is the Flight Foam Leap, which is the aliphatic TPU, and we have the more downward sloping, aggressive spoon-shaped plate that you might see in things like the Puma DV8 Nitro Elite 3 or the Nike VaporFly series. So we have this big volume of aliphatic TPU under the forefoot now. The weights of these are pretty much the same, virtually the same. In this pair of Metaspeed Edge Tokyo, I weighed the left shoe at 165 grams or 5.8 ounces, and I weighed the right shoe at 163 grams or 5.7 ounces. So that's a very competitive weight. The only thing that's going to be on that weight scale is its brother or sister, the Sky Tokyo, or some of the short course super shoes like the Streakfly 2, of course. The Puma Fast R Nitro Elite 3 is almost as light as that. It's 6 ounces in my size. So these are very light boys, and I can't wait to get them on foot. Let's do some road testing. All right, I'm doing the little Pepsi challenge here. I've got the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo on my right foot and the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo on my left foot. And I'll include these both in a shoe off later, but I'm just kind of doing the walk test. And yeah, they definitely feel more like each other than either of them feel like a different shoe, but I can definitely tell on the toe off, definitely, that the Edge Tokyo is a little more aggressive, and it's a little bit more stable in the heel. I wouldn't call it stable in its own right, but it's a little more stable than the heel in the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo. All right, more on that later. Good morning. First run day in the ASICS Metaspeed Edge Tokyo. And I have some friends who are doing some mile repeats on the road today, so I'm gonna jump in with them. This is kind of an a la carte workout for me. It's not really part of my training plan, but I can't not test these shoes at some various paces. So we'll see how they do. I'm gonna try and talk at a tempo effort here. Smooth yet propulsive. Still on the crank side of things. Maybe not as crankish as the Metaspeed Edge Paris, but it might be able to crank for longer. Who knows? Okay, I finished my first run in the ASICS Metaspeed Edge Tokyo, and 10.5 miles altogether with 4x1 mile at kind of a tempo effort in there. And the first rep, tried to go for a couple minutes, not looking at my watch, just going by effort, and I was trying to play guess the pace. I figured I was doing about a 6:15 pace, looked down, and the average pace for that mile at that time was 5:58. And I said, ooh, these are nice and quick. Well, I did a 6-minute mile, two 559s, and then the last one was a 550, but that last one had a nice fast back quarter mile on it. Definitely feel like it's on the crank side, but a little bit smoother than the previous version. That also means maybe a little bit less crankish. So maybe it could be similar use case scenarios, but for longer periods of races. Still lots of testing to be done, and of course I still need to do a shoe off. It's time we do a shoe off, and in the middle here we have the ASICS Metaspeed Edge Tokyo, and I will compare it with the ASICS Metaspeed Edge Paris, its predecessor, the Adidas Adizero Adios Pro 4, the Hoka Cielo X1 2.0, the OG Nike VaporFly Next %, the Puma Fast R Nitro Elite 3, and its brother/sister shoe, the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Tokyo. Let's get to it. All right, we have the ASICS Metaspeed Edge Paris and the new Metaspeed Edge Tokyo. So the weight difference in these shoes is maybe 10 to 12 grams. Can't really feel that. What I can feel is the different midsole response. And the big midsole difference is in this shoe, the top layer, the Flight Foam Leap, which is a lot more compressive and resilient than just the Flight Foam Turbo Plus mix. So I feel like I'm setting into the shoe a lot more and bouncing out of it a lot more. And in that sense, the Edge Tokyo feels like a little bit more of a shoe, but not in a bad way, in that it's giving you more. The Edge Paris might still be a little more poppy, but I might be able to wear the Edge Tokyo for more time on foot, which is really one of the things that I had wished for more of in the Edge Paris. Still very similar to each other. Yeah, I want to talk about these two more in the shoe talk for sure. All right, now I have the Adidas Adios Pro 4 versus the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo. And when I did the Sky Tokyo video about 3 weeks ago, I had the Adios 4 out here, and I was talking about how that early stage rocker really accentuates the difference in those shoes. Now that we have the Edge here, which superficially doesn't look all that different, it definitely has that forward bias, more reminiscent of the Adios 4. So you get the energetic response from the combination of foams that you would get from the Sky Tokyo, but with that forward leverage inducing bias that you might get from something in the Adizero line, like the Adios Pro 4, or maybe even the Pro Evo 1 or 2. And I think that mainly has to do with the position of the plate, the downward scoop of the plate. So it really is a marriage of the things that I like from those two different shoes. I'm really excited to be doing this shoe off right now. Now we have the Hoka Cielo X1 2.0 versus the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo. And the Cielo X1 2.0 was a viewer request after I did the Sky Tokyo video. But it's appropriate here because even though it's a long course shoe, it's still a cranker. Just with that big bubble of foam under the midfoot, it rolls really aggressively forward and makes you pop off that forefoot. It's about 45 to 50 grams heavier than the Edge Tokyo, and I feel that side by side. But if you really want that maximum foam under the midfoot and that rolling sensation rather than the popping sensation, you might still want that. If you prefer something like the Mizuno Wave Rebellion Pro Series, you might like the Cielo X1 2.0 over the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo. However, if you want something a little bit more traditional super shoe that still has some good forward pop in a very lightweight package, the Edge Tokyo at this point is pretty hard to beat. All right, now we have the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo versus the OG, the Nike Next VaporFly version 1, which in my opinion is the best version of the VaporFly. I think Andy Rayner, the Fall Runner, would agree. The
VaporFly OG still has a lot of crank. It still throws you forward, especially if you're using the full midsole, landing midfoot, or even grazing the heel. What it doesn't have that I'm getting right now from the Edge Tokyo is that extra bounce off the forefoot. There's definitely more under the forefoot in the Edge Tokyo, which maybe at VO2 max paces, these two would be similar, but anything in like a tempo range or longer duration race paces, the advantage is to the Edge Tokyo for sure. I think I might be using my VaporFlies just for workouts from now on. All right, we have the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo and the Puma Fast-Star Nitro Elite 3. Oh boy, this is a fun one. The Edge Tokyo so far is the closest thing, I think, to dethroning the Fast-Star Nitro Elite 3, just based off this half mile that I'm doing in them. Both very energetic, both really making the use of that aliphatic TPU midsole substance. Now, they do it differently. With the Edge Tokyo, all of that forward momentum, that aggressive roll and pop is underneath the foot, underneath the distal midfoot to forefoot, and it feels like a more natural shoe. With the Fast-Star Nitro Elite 3, you've got that plate extending beyond the forefoot. If you're forefoot biased, you're getting a lot from that, but you're also kind of cranking further into your kickoff phase than you normally would be. So one's more natural, the other feels more mechanical, but they're both fast AF. Which one I'm going to choose for Richmond Half Marathon in November? So far, it's probably going to be between these two. All right, last one. Edge Tokyo versus the Sky Tokyo, comparing apples to apples. And let me stop here just to prove it. Have the Edge Tokyo on the right foot, there's the black outsole. Sky Tokyo on the left foot, there is the red outsole. Okay, so friends, no matter what other shoe tubers and influencers say, the differences in these shoes don't come down to foot strike. At least they don't for me. My foot strike is the same, but the experience is different. It's a subtle difference, and they are both equally as good. Let me say that again. They are both equally as good as each other, quality-wise, but it depends what experience you want, maybe what course or use case scenario you want. They both have a similar midsole response, but if you are like me, where you would really like to drive off the forefoot and have a forward lean, I have a little forward lean to my running, I think you might prefer the Edge Tokyo. If you run tall and are really focused more on floating, maintaining a consistent but fast pace, you might prefer the Sky Tokyo. I will use, train, and race in both of these shoes. Sorry, there's lawn mowing going on. But I think for a lot of the racing I'm planning to do, I might personally lean more towards the Edge Tokyo over the Sky Tokyo. More in the shoe talk. All right, had to do the long run test in the Edge Tokyo. It wasn't a 20-mile long run or anything, but it was 16 and a little over 16 and a half, close to almost 27 kilometers. And the last 4 miles were at a marathon effort, which I think I got a little bit of that on camera. I can definitely say that these shoes hold up better after 2+ hours on foot than the Metaspeed Edge Paris did. I wasn't wanting for more cushion by the end of this run. Who knows at the end of a marathon whether I would still feel that way. But I think these things could more likely go the distance better than the Paris series. All right, it's shoe talk time.
Now, if you've been following my channel for any amount of time over the past couple of years, then you will know that I am a big fan of the ASICS Metaspeed lines of shoes, the Sky and the Edge, more so the Edge. And I've got the Edge Tokyo right here. And I'm very happy with the updates that they've made to the Edge Tokyo, the latest iteration as of July 2025. But it's not perfect. And there might be some use case scenarios where I would prefer its predecessor, the Edge Paris. In fact, if I were going to race a fast 5K, I would probably still reach for the Edge Paris just because I get a little bit more feedback from the road and I don't set into the midsole as much as I do in the Edge Tokyo. That, or I would choose the Puma Fastar Nitro Elite 3. However, having taken this shoe on a long run test now, which the Edge Paris didn't really pass when I did it last year. It could do the distance, but I felt beat up. That same amount of time on foot, I didn't really feel beat up in the Edge Tokyo, and I think it's because of that more compliant and resilient midsole experience. So I think the wheelhouse for this shoe is a lot greater than it was in the previous version, but as far as those highest end speeds, I would probably still reach for the Edge Paris or another super shoe. This shoe I would feel comfortable racing for a marathon, a PR marathon. Whether I would choose it over the Puma Fastar Nitro Elite 3 for that distance, I don't know. I think the greatest part of this shoe's wheelhouse is still going to be in that half marathon range. I am very impressed with it. Yeah, so let's talk about the spectrum. When I did my past few shoe reviews that I've done with the Takumi Sen 11 and the Sky Paris, I've talked about where shoes lie on the spectrum of crank versus cruise, and where a cruiser shoe is something with more of a floating, staying at a consistent fast pace for a long time, and a cranking shoe is something that you really lean into and get that energy off the forefoot. And not to say that one person is a crank runner or a cruise runner, but you might want a different experience for a different situation. And that is the main difference between the Edge Tokyo and the Sky Tokyos. One leans more towards the cruiser side, which would be the Sky series, and that's for all of the Metaspeed iterations. And one leads more towards the crank experience, and that would be the Edge series. And I think in the Tokyo iterations of the Sky and the Edge, they both have a bigger wheelhouse than they once did in previous iterations. And one is still very much a cruiser, the other one is still more on the crank side, but they both more skew towards the middle. So if we throw up the matrix and have some exemplar shoes, I also kind of added a middle column there of shoes that are kind of halfway in between cruise and crank, then I would put the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo right here. It's still a cranker in my opinion, but it kind of leans more towards that rolling sensation where you could do some cruising in it as well. And now it really does look like a Dungeons and Dragons alignment chart. So I apologize for that. But if you are a shoe nerd like me, then surely you can appreciate that. All right, that is my review of the ASICS Metaspeed Edge Tokyo at $270 US. I don't like seeing the price increase, but this is one of the shoes that I think is worth it. Durability may be an issue. You're seeing a lot of creasing there. PIBA creases early, and I wouldn't take it on as many variable surfaces, like unpaved surfaces, like I felt comfortable doing with the Paris. However, now that I have the Edge Tokyo, I can take the Sky Paris and the Edge Paris on more of the off-road races like I did at Ultimate Runner. Okay, thanks guys for watching my review. Don't forget to like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, and we'll bring you some more content. See you on the next run.